if there is a problem, please tell. I can take the mic. Okay. I would like to thank everybody for coming and inviting me, and I specifically want to thank two of my teachers who taught me in 2004 for my masters, Subir sir and Amitav sir. And well, my paper is Theory and Praxis, Gaze, Sexuation and Woman as a Symptom in Othello. So, well, when I'm talking about gaze, I would like to begin my paper by quoting Norman Bryson's idea about gaze. Between the retina and the world is inserted a screen of signs, a screen consisting of all the multiple discourses on vision built into the social arena. Now, as I was talking about the retina and the world, so between the gaze of Othello onto Desdemona is inserted the signs of Venice. The society has its own visual discourse, and the multiple discourse which Othello establishes while gazing at Desdemona is the variety of variety of the discourses that we are going to see through the visuals. Now, the interaction between Othello and Desdemona cannot be of the same nature without the society of Venice. Lacan, Bryson notes, consider this screen of signs derived from society in the form of a shadow. To quote, a network that comes to us from the outside. Mobile terrace of signification, a mosaic that moves. This network is greater than its individual agents or operators. When I learn to speak, I am inserted into a system of discourse that were there before I was and will remain after I am gone. Similarly, when I learn to see socially, that is, when I begin to articulate my retinal experience with the codes of recognition that come to me from my social milieus, I am inserted into a system of visual discourse that saw the world before I do and will go on seeing after I see no longer. Othello, the Moor, is inserted into the foreign system of discourse, to quote, in Venice, and thereby he begins to articulate his retinal experience with a Venetian code of recognition. His initiation into this new network happens through his gaze onto Desdemona. As he says, I fetch my life and being from men of royal siege, and my demerits may speak unbulleted to as proud a fortune as this I have reached for no Iago, for that I love the gentle Desdemona, I would not my unhoused free condition put into circumscription and confine for the sea's worth. For Lacan, gaze is a drive. So when he is looking at Desdemona, he is developing this drive, which is a partial manifestation of his desire. For Othello, though, the gaze has become central enough to capture desire in its entirety. Between him and Desdemona, it covers all, to quote, dialectical mediation of desire. According to Lacanian psychoanalysis, gazing is vital in the mirror stage, for it relates to subject's recognition of self and other, and initiates its constitution of symbolic order. First gaze of mother and the self represented as a gessored root in the child's psyche and becomes the child's lifelong goal to search for the union with mother and to achieve the state of unity and totality. Now, for Othello, Desdemona becomes the M-other, mother with M-other, and therefore he uses this in the Lacanian graph of sexuation. We see that Othello is inserted into matheme, which is depicted in the form of desire of X is proportional to the castrated represented by phi of X, and his as Lacan has pointed out, the object alpha, which he drops on the equation of sexuation, is the handkerchief. Now, the handkerchief here, as I would like to say, is the very Lacanian element of the alpha object that he drops from the equation. Now, why that handkerchief becomes so important? Now, Lacan in his graph of sexuation has explained that it serves as a phallic function. Now, if we see the phallic function in normal societal order is represented in the traditional society by adding surname to the names. That acts as a phallic function that is imposed upon upon subjects. Now, here Othello is a foreign element who does not have any other name than Othello himself. So he creates the phallic function only in the form of handkerchief, which he inherits from his father as well as from his mother, and which he gives to Desdemona as a symbolic phallus. Now, Othello claims his possessiveness through the vision of Desdemona with the handkerchief. The handkerchief, to quote, "Did an Egyptian to my mother give. She was a charmer and could almost read the thoughts of people. She told her while she kept it, it would make her amiable and subdue my father entirely to her love. But if she lost it, or make a gift of it, my father's I," again this E-Y-E-I is also the individual I. So the father's I, the ego, the phallic function here in the egocentric portrayal should hold her loathed, and his spirit should hunt after new fancies. She dying gave it me, and bid me, when my fate would have me wife, to give it to her. I did so, and take heed on it, make it a darling like your precious eye, another use of I. So for Othello, the handkerchief becomes the imaginary phallus, as I said from the mapping 5. Desire to be this imaginary object for the other is the game of seduction. But for Desdemona, the handkerchief is a symbolic phallus. So she is taking on the handkerchief in the mode that the phallic function is usually served, taking on the second name of the family. A pure signifier that has no signifier. So the handkerchief here becomes the symbolic phallus, and therefore a pure signifier which does not have any signifier. When Othello cannot find the handkerchief with Desdemona, he feels castrated. So he enters into the concept of barred subject with the loss of the phallus, that is the symbolic manifestation produced by the handkerchief. And so therefore you see that Othello becomes the Lacanian barred subject, the castrated, divided, barred, castrated subject, forever marked by a lack or a hole, as symbolized by the first alphabet of his name O, as suggested by J. Fillingham in his Lacanian analysis of Othello. The sound of O in Othello, the name of the book is Sound of O in Othello, the real of the tragedy of desire. The handkerchief allows Othello to recollect his infantile zoisa. Its absence generates a feeling of castration, as it becomes an impediment to constitute a pseudo-reunion with the image of his mother, M-other, which is displaced by Desdemona. Rather than referring to fathers and mothers, which invites thinking in terms of images, Lacan instead articulate the Oedipal structure in terms of series of algebraic symbols, which I was telling. Desire is represented by reverse E, and the person with X, and the castration with the phi. And therefore, if we see the first line of the equation, it represents the complex relationship between Othello and Desdemona in Oedipal dynamics. The Om being Othello, and the femme is Desdemona. The upper line, which desire of X, that is the desire of Othello, is proportional to the castrated section of X, that is Othello. Can be read as to quote, there exists a being that is not castrated or alienated in language. So initially, when he is into the Venetian code of society, he enters as a whole, as a whole of a man, not men, whole of a man, who come under the phallic function. But when Desdemona loses the handkerchief, he gets into the position of the barred subject. Now, the second line, that is the alpha x, that is the object which he drops from the equation, can be read as to quote, all beings are castrated or alienated in language. So not only Othello is castrated with the loss of handkerchief, but he is also alienated into the Victorian code, into the Venetian code of the language. Taken together, down the law, as is seen in the, taken together, the upper line articulate the function as a being that hasn't sacrificed the Zoisa, that lays down the law, and as seen in the speech of Desdemona, my noble father, I do perceive here a divided duty. To you I am bound for life and education, and so it goes on. And at the end it ends with, so much I challenge that I may profess due to the Moor, my lord. While the lower proposition articulates a subject, that is the subject to the law, or that has sacrificed the Zoisa to enter the symbolic order as is symbolized by the speech of Othello, Othello replies by saying, what if I do obey? So here Othello is not going against the Venetian society in order to accept Desdemona. Then and thereby he wants to get interpreted into the symbolic order of the Venetian society. Then what is the basic didactic relationship between the gaze of Othello and the gaze of Desdemona is showing that when Othello is gazing at Desdemona, there Othello is trying to give what he doesn't have. So why? Because Lacan has said to love is to recognize your lack and place it in other. So to love is to give what you don't have. So what does Othello offer? Othello feels that in the Venetian society he does not have the light, and therefore he offers Desdemona the light, but it is lacking in him. The light that is lacking in him is offered to Desdemona, and Desdemona on the other hand offers what she lacks, and therefore the two lack merges to produce a manque d'être. That is, the two lack overlap. The bard subject experiences a sense of being a wholeness. So when Desdemona leaves her parental home, he feels that her lack is overlapping, and whereas the lack of Othello, which is represented by other or the mother, is overlapping with Desdemona's lack when she is leaving her father's house. So coming back to the last part of my argument, do I have 5 minutes? Yes, you have 3 minutes. Okay. So when the final section of my paper talks about woman as a symptom. So when we talk about woman as a symptom, it says here Desdemona is a symptom for the one who is encumbered with the phallus. Now Desdemona is a symptom in the structure of anxiety. Here, as I was talking about the lack, we all know that it is not by the fulfillment of lack that we go into a state of a fantasy state of which is free of anxiety. Rather, by trying to fulfill the lack, we enter into the anxiety state. The fulfillment of lack produces the anxiety, and therefore, when we inquire into Desdemona's position, we see that Desdemona at the end, when she dies, as I was talking about the light which Othello lacks, this is where the that is in Lacanian description, Othello's fate is determined by desire itself, irrespective of gender. If language is born of absence, Catherine Delsey tells us, so is desire. And at the same time, at the same moment, this must be so. Desire which invests the self in rather necessarily precipitates a division in the subject. For Zizek and Lacan, all-inclusive whole of life and death are supplemented both by living and a deathly life, which points to the way in which we cannot die, not just once, but twice. Most obviously, we will suffer a biological death in which our bodies will fail and eventually disintegrate. This death is real. involving the obliteration of our material self, but we can also suffer a symbolic death. This does not involve the annihilation of our actual body, rather it entails the destruction of our symbolic universe and extermination of our subject position. And therefore, I would like to bring about the last diagram, which is of a cheveau. That is, when Othello gazes at Desdemona, that gaze is reflected back, and therefore he wants to put out the light at the end. Because thus we can see that it is not Desdemona who is confined by the male gaze of Othello, but rather it is Othello who is trapped by the desire of other, which is diagrammatically represented by Lacan. So Othello's gaze turns around, that is, reflexively turns back upon his own self, and he is caught inside the desire of other. Desdemona and the light from lamp in Act 5 Scene 2 causes Othello the physiological discomfort as it turns his gaze onto himself, revealing how he is ensnared by the desire in other, which is equal to the lack or hole in her. Thus Othello exclaims, "Put out the light," and then "Put out the light. If I quench thee, thou flaming minster, I can again thy former light restore. Should I repent me, but once put out the light." It is desperate attempt on his part to be free from the cheveau, but to no avail. Desdemona's death dissolves the subject from Othello's existence. Like Sartre, Lacan too is unable to read the full implications of the dissolving of the subject, and this made Bryson take note of the Japanese philosopher Kitaro Nishida and Kinjini Nishitani. To quote, "Although the centralized subject is progressively dismantled by Sartre and Lacan, and the direction for their thought is unmistakably towards a radical decentering of the subject, there seem to me to be areas in which the standpoint of the subject as center is actually retained. The result of that residual centering upon the standpoint of the subject is that is portrayed as menaced at that vestigial center, threatened from without, and in some sense persecuted in the visual domain by the regard or the gaze." Now, the mobile terrace of signification is no more limited to the social origins. Desdemona's death is the radical decentering of the subject for Othello, but what is retained is his racial subjectivity, the turban Turk in the gaze of Venetian, which is finally displaced by his biological death. "I took by the throat the circumcised dog and smote him thus." At the end, he finds himself being reduced to a circumcised dog, not in the eye of Venetian, but to his own gaze. Only through his death does Othello dissolve the confines of his reflexive gaze and the trap of the desire of other.